Thank you very much. As mentioned, we're here to talk about keeping infrastructure as code secure. And for this session, we have a short agenda, a short introduction into infrastructure as code, talking about KICS. We'll do a short demo, and then we'll discuss about what's new and what's on the roadmap for KICS. I'll repeat it at the end, but KICS is an open source project done by Checkmark. It's available on GitHub with all its features. Everything is there. If you want to contribute, you want to research, you want to help us, contribution is, of course, welcome. Let's talk about, in short, what is infrastructure as code. And from here now, I'll keep calling it IaC instead of repeating infrastructure as code all the time. So IaC is the process of managing and provisioning software for machine-readable definition files. If you've been into DevOps for quite a while, you remember the times when you had to start a machine yourself, going into, let's say, AWS console, bringing an EC2 resource and so on. You might at some point started to write script to do it through their API. But at some point in time, we now have better options for that. It could be AWS CloudFormation, it could be Terraform, and it can be similar languages or definitions files by the other cloud providers. Each system has its own uniqueness. And also, if you know Docker, which I guess you do, you can both use the Docker file itself as an infrastructure as code file, as a manifest of how to build your software. And if you have Docker Compose to bring a few resources online, define which ports to expose, or what the connection between two Docker images, it's also a consideration for infrastructure as code. The benefit here is, of course, to speed up your configuration and making sure the implementation of new computing infrastructure could be done quite fast, and also can be done in a repetitive way. So what you've done in the previous time is exactly what you've done now, because you use the exact same scripts or the exact same definitions. That's also a way to reduce the cost a resource needs in order to become online, or if you want to schedule it on and off, it's much easier when you can provision it quite fast and scale it relatively easily. And another important thing is it's a way to eliminate inconsistencies between different environments. Think that in the past you had a dev environment and then a staging and then a production, and usually they all had a lot of differences between them, mostly because of human errors or unintentional differences. Today, you can take the exact same definitions files of the production environment, just bring your own local development environment. You can clone it into a staging. It's much faster when you have the full recipe already available. In most cases, infrastructure as code files are text files, at least for the initial recipe. Sometimes it's mostly either YAML or JSON format, not all of them, but that's the most frequent ones. And from there, in some cases, you might compile it or build a plan out of it, especially with Terraform, in order to apply it to the server. Each cloud provider has its own tools, but we'll talk all of them as a general, as KICS know to deal with each one of them. Talking a little bit about infrastructure as code security. There was a research done 2 years ago by Cloud42, and they scanned about 200,000 infrastructure as code templates, and they found that most of them had at least one vulnerability or a misconfiguration. We'll intentionally talk about misconfigurations because in a lot of cases, the difference between a problem and not a problem is a switch that says something like public yes, encryption off, and so on. So it's easy to fix. It's not code as the regular software code when the bug is quite hidden. It is usually just the selections out of existing options from whatever the format you're using has available. And because of that, we'll treat it as a misconfiguration, which is also relatively easy to fix. unless you have something relatively sophisticated, which is a dependency between a few components. So that research have shown that about half of the S3 bucket didn't have server-side encryption out of them. A lot of the servers provisioned for infrastructure as code had an open SSH port to the public internet, and a lot of S3 buckets didn't have login enabled. And that means if someone by accident writes to your bucket, you have no idea to know about it. And also if there's other problems regarding the bucket, you have no way to figure out. Encryption is important if someone gets access to it, if another application might get access, and we want to make sure everything is both as private and encrypted as possible, although in some architectures, there's of course public buckets, which are intentional, but in that case, we'll flag them beforehand. So as you can see, most of the templates have at least one kind of misconfiguration. In some cases, there are of course more than one. And our goal with KICS is to help organizations and DevOps make sure they reduce their risks for misconfiguration and security problems. Talking about the last quarters, or sorry, a quarter and a half ago, the top misconfigurations we saw. The first one is for Docker files running the processes as root instead of a specific user. A lot of web services had port 80 left open, although for a lot of services we'll prefer HTTPS, SSL, and so on, and that would be port 443. We have a lot of load balancers have their management port or sensitive ports exposed to the entire network, while we want to limit that to a management subnet or segmentation. A lot of EC2 instances have a public IP, although it's usually not required. And in most cases, we'll prefer to expose them to the internet through a load balancer or a reverse proxy or another mechanism that doesn't allow direct access to the server. And as I mentioned before, S3 buckets without server-side encryptions or becoming public as well. Talking about KICS, KICS allow you to scan for misconfiguration in your infrastructure as code files. As you can see, we support a lot of engines or configuration or languages from different vendors. Some are vendor specific, some are vendor neutral. Of course, supporting AWS, Azure, and Google. With latest releases of KICS, there's already also support for Alibaba Cloud. And of course, in the future, we plan to support more cloud providers. As you can see, we also support cloud-native technologies like Kubernetes and Helm, and technologies like Docker. The idea here is to be able to scan whatever platform you use in order to provision your cloud resources. Would it be cloud-native or not? We usually follow whatever the cloud providers release. We try to do it relatively soon. And as an open source project, contributions are welcome, and you can both suggest help and have a feature requested on our GitHub account. I'll share the address later. What we do with KICS is we analyze the IaC files with a large amount of queries. We divide these queries into categories that would check access control, availability, the backup, best practices around that specific platform. Of course, the build process where it's applicable, encryption, insecure configuration, the insecure defaults, which is sometimes the case, networking to the best of our abilities, especially with the configuration of load balancers, servers, and so on. Observability, meaning the ability to understand what happened in a certain case, and the preservance of logs. Of course, resource management, and secret management, which is far more important. And of course, supply chain problems, because you might depend on a resource which is problematic by itself. KICS has more than 2,000 queries with these categories and more. Actually, the number keeps changing almost on a daily basis. At the moment, we're very close to 2,500, and you can check our GitHub account to see the recent number. We have contributions with a lot of queries and a lot of security researchers, which either found a bug with something we wrote or suggested a new query for their own. We see a lot of people who have an expertise in one of the domains, either from the list or a new category, and then they really help with improving or adding to their specific, based on their specific knowledge. And it's really nice to see a researcher that goes back to the community and contributes. KICS is written in Go, and we distribute it as a Docker file, a container based on Docker. As well, you're welcome to integrate it into your software development pipeline as your DevOps or your DevSecOps sees fit. You can run it as part of your development process itself by the developer. When he writes or changes the files locally, he can run KICS to checks for misconfiguration and get immediate feedback. It can be run as part of the source control management platform, GitLab, GitHub, or whatever you want to use. There's quite a lot of integrations to both of them, or anything which is Git-based. You can run it on your CI/CD pipeline. And of course, there's a lot of options to do these integration as well. Usually we see a lot of companies use it to scan the pull request that might suggest a change in the IaC files, and getting an indication about the problems before approving the pull request and before the code becomes live. You can decide to run KICS on a gated check before deploying to production. That's after the code has already been committed and accepted to the Git repo, but before deploying to a cloud environment. And of course, there's another way to scan production environment. KICS has an ability to go to a production environment, get the infrastructures and code definitions, building them in a reverse way, and then scan them for misconfigurations. So also, if you have a running environment, even if you provision it manually or with infrastructure as code files, you might scan them as well without having the sources. That's something KICS would do behind the scenes. That's also a good way to check for drift between your infrastructure as code files to whatever you have in the cloud environment. That's already provided as part of the KICS container image. We'll switch to a short demo, and from there we'll continue with the presentation. So just a second.
Okay. So I will start by going to the main KICS website, which is kics.io. KICS has its own brand under KICS. Everything that we just discussed, how it can help you, what are the support, and what are the attributes is available here. Two very important links. The first one is the link to the documentation, and the second one is the link to the repository. So in the repository, you can see everything, the code, the engine, the queries, the roadmap, all the bugs, all the issues, all the feature requests. If you liked it, if you tried it and it worked for you, we do appreciate the star. If you didn't like and something is not working for you or something is missing, I do encourage you to go and open us an issue, or if you want to have a chat with the team, we are also available on Gitter. So we do have a live chat during office hours and even on weekends. So if you get stuck, we will help you. So this is the repository. The documentation site has everything for you to learn even more and to get started. If you want to see how to run and how to execute, everything is here. If you want to understand the underlying architecture, how we build, how the engine is working, this is also available. All the configurations, all the command line, everything is available. If you want to start contributing and write your own queries and expand KICS to add additional checks, this is also available. Integration, as I mentioned, we have a list of quite a comprehensive set of tools which we can integrate. So everything that you need is available here. So you can practically start by just reading the documentation file and getting started. The fastest way to get KICS running is using the Docker image. All you need to do is run or pull the latest KICS version from Docker Hub. We push a new version every 2 weeks. So we always encourage running with the latest one. And then the basic command is simply pointing KICS to the repository, to the infrastructure as code repository, which KICS version, how many or which queries you want to run, and what is the output. We support a couple of output formats: PDF, Sarif, JSON, HTML, and you will see those right now. So now let's get it up and running. Okay, so that should be enough. First version, first command, I will pull the latest KICS from Docker Hub. I already have it, so I am good. And now what I'm about to do is I will execute KICS on the same example that I just showed you of having port 80 that is open, and the output format will be an HTML report. You can see that I'm running a KICS version 1.4.8, which was released last Wednesday, and it takes a couple of seconds to execute. And in the meanwhile, we will open the report. There we go. As you can see, the scan already finished. In general, infrastructure as code scans are much faster compared to other application security testing tools. This one ran for 22 seconds, and I will drag the report from here. And this is how the KICS reports look. So on the top part, we see all the metadata, what version, when did it start, when did it end. This is an interactive report, so I can filter out all the information that I want. And here I get the list of issues that KICS found. In here, I get the vulnerability or the misconfiguration name, in this case, HTTP port 80, platform is Terraform, the category is networking and firewall. The description, what did we base this misconfiguration on? It can come from the cloud vendor, or it can come from the infrastructure as code provider. And we won't finish it there. We will also give you remediation advice. So what was the problematic file? What is expected? What was found? And also a snippet of the code where KICS thinks that this is where you need to have the fix. And we do that for every misconfiguration that KICS finds. And this information is available on every report that we have. So also the JSON file and other formats as well. So this was the first part, the Docker image. 2 very simple commands and you have it up and running. The second is to have it running as part of a pipeline, where in this case I have a GitLab pipeline or a GitLab repository. This is an infrastructure as code repository that simulates a real application that deploys quite a few resources on AWS using Terraform. And what I've done is that as part of the pipeline, I have configured KICS to run. In this case, I'm not using the Docker image. I'm using the Linux executable. We have executable for every platform, so Windows, Linux, and Mac. And what I'm doing here is that two differences from the previous execution. First of all, the output will be JSON. This will allow me to use this JSON as an artifact on the pipeline itself, and also a special KICS command which says that fail on high. So in case KICS found any high issue, the exit value, the exit code will not be 0, and I will fail the pipeline. So now let's execute it and see it live. Okay, to not waste our time, you can see that this is usually taking approximately 1 minute. So I will simply show you the previous execution. And you can see that it failed. You can see the output, the console output, and you can see that overall, this is the result summary. We had 20 issues and overall 126. You can see that the exit code is 50. If you want to learn more about the KICS exit code, this is also part of the documentation, a website that I already showed you. And as I mentioned, I can upload the JSON file as a job artifact and can see that live. I can also download it and forward it to any other system that I want and analyze it further. So this is the JSON output, and I have KICS integrated as part of my pipeline. The last thing that I forgot to show you is actually this one, where if you want to understand all the checks or all the policies that KICS is running, then we have them here in the queries list or the queries catalog. You can download them. You can filter according to severity, platform, description, category, and you can also filter according to the actual infrastructure as code. So if you want to see only the Docker or only the Kubernetes, you can easily do that and download each one of those or all of them together. Very useful when you want to take this and forward it to someone in your team, and also asking if this is something, if this some of the policies that are important to you as well. So this concludes the demo part. We saw two parts. First is the Docker execution, which is two very basic steps, and the second one is part of the GitLab.
Okay, just a second. One of the things I really like to do is running KICS on the KICS repository itself. And in this case, it scans a few thousands of infrastructure as code files and checks. And the repository itself also has both negative and positive examples for our internal testing of the queries. And in this case, I wanted to show you that with all the scan of a few thousand of files, finding a lot of problems, of course, this is intentional. The scan time is about 4.5 minutes. And I use it to benchmark KICS on the KICS repository, which also always have an increasing number of files. My guess is for your scans, it's going to be about 15 to 20 seconds in a case of a medium size repository with relatively still a lot of infrastructure as code files. The case in a small repository or very little files is probably going to be like between 5 and 10 seconds. So don't be afraid to integrate that into your CI/CD. It's actually a big benefit, and the time consumption is very low. Just a second, we'll go back to the presentation. Sorry, not this one. Okay. KICS Advantages, except of being very easy to operate and to work with, it has the largest query coverage comparing to other tools, both commercial and open source. It's very easy to extend it. KICS uses the regular language made by OPA, Open Policy Agent, and that means it's very compatible with other tools which are required to follow a policy or to integrate that. We see it a lot with cloud native implementations, and it's a big benefit for KICS to be able to both import and export relatively easy queries from other tools. The presentation of actual versus expected values in each result, and the fact that we try to provide a proposed fix, of course, when available. That's not always the case, but it is in most cases. KICS has a very robust and simple architecture that allows us, and you, of course, as contributors to open source, to add support for both new engine, new platforms, and new cloud providers. And we see it goes over with time. KICS is available on a public GitHub repository, github.com/checkmark/KICS. KICS website is kics.io, very easy to remember. And it also has the documentation website, which is generated with each new version of the code. As already mentioned, we have a release of KICS every 2 weeks, a minor release, and usually a more major release once a quarter or a quarter and a half. If you want to contribute, we'll be more than happy to get your help. And we see it, we have a bunch of people already working with us on a daily basis. Talking about other ways you can use KICS, we also have KICS as a service, in which you can either upload files or give us a URL for your GitHub repository or public repository, and we'll scan it for you and give you the results. You leave an email and we'll send you the report by email. As mentioned before, the report could be either an HTML file, a PDF file, if you need to email it to someone, and of course, JSONs for whatever integration you might want. We also have KICS certified to a few of the benchmarks around security. KICS 1.5 is certified for AWS Foundation benchmark. And we work to get KICS certified for Kubernetes as well. And that's something going to be released quite soon. What is planned for 2022? First, we're going to extend the coverage for the certifications, Kubernetes first, and then we're going to follow for the other cloud providers. We're going to keep extending the coverage for more cloud providers. We have support for them. For Azure and Google, we have, let's say, good coverage, but they keep innovating and we keep making sure we support whatever they provide. With Terraform provider, we're going to upgrade to version 4, probably as part of KICS 1.6. We're working with integration to both Red Hat and AWS own tools, both their Security Hub and their CloudFormation hooks. On the way, there's a Argo CD integration that would be probably released in the coming month. And we're always happy to follow up on whatever feedback we get on GitHub. That goes with the format of the reports. We were asked to do integration with some of the common formats available, not only regular JSON. GitLab has adopted KICS as their own infrastructure as code tool last November, and we're very happy for that. Our goal is to be the default infrastructure as code scan, and we'll really see it become a reality with the adoption of KICS in a lot of other both security agencies and companies. As I mentioned, KICS is quite popular, both with the number of queries and both with the number of downloads. KICS is, in the next few days, will reach 650,000 downloads on Docker Hub. And that's a number we see that grows on a daily basis. That's it from me. If you have questions, I'll be happy to take them.
All right. Thank you for your presentation, Lior. There was one question already from Bente Schopman. How can you create a security query in KICS?
Okay. That's actually something that we cover in the documentation. The documentation has a section about how to create new queries, and of course, explanation about the existing ones. If you go to KICS.io, you have on the menu the way to get to the documentation very fast, which is docs.kics.io. And from there, you have all the guides. If you have a problem, you can reach us over GitHub discussions, and we'll be more than happy to help. Both me and the R&D team is widely available whenever you want. We communicate on GitHub discussions, GitHub issues, and if, of course, there's a need, you can email me directly. I'll be more than happy to make sure your interest and your contribution is taken into consideration.